Wow.
Yes, we are live. Welcome, dreamers, to Chasing Dream Thursdays. I am Lisa McLean from Lisa McLean Publications. And we meet every Thursday to talk about all kinds of exciting things to do with publishing and writing. Tonight, I'm really excited. We have the super talented Kia Penso with us tonight, writer, editor, um, just an extraordinary person. I'm gonna do her bio in a minute, and then we can ask her some more questions about her experience. But she is amazing. Before we start, hi Samantha, thanks for joining. Before we start, we'll do our usual. What little step did you take to chasing your dreams this week? And I always share mine. And my little step this week was to make sure that we had this conversation tonight, to make sure that I followed up with Kia. We have regular meetings because she inspires me as a writer. And my little step was to make sure that this happened. It was not allowed um, to not. So that's my little step. If you have something to share, please do so in the chat. And I'm going to invite all of my Instagram followers to jump across to Facebook and YouTube, to our live streams. Look for Lisa McLean Publications so that you can follow the conversation that I'll be having with Kia tonight. So, going to give you 2 minutes to kind of settle in, see if anyone else jumps in, and then we are going to get going. All right. So I'm going to jump across. Whoops. All right. So here we are. Kia, I'm going to kind of give everyone share the background that I have here written about you because I don't know that I can do it justice by ad-libbing it. So let me bring it up. And disclaimer, this is my cousin, but I think she's amazing. So here we go. Kia Pencer grew up in Jamaica and has lived most of her adult life in the US. She supports her writing and art habits by editing writing and managing publications projects for large multilateral international institutions. She writes about literature and remembering. Despite making almost no effort beyond the writing, Kia has published one book of literary criticism, three introductions to collections and anthologies, a short biographical essay on the French 17th century philosopher Michel de Montaigne. Did I pronounce his name correctly?
Good enough.
A few short fiction pieces, and an exhibition catalog essay for a respected art gallery in New York. She has written and edited for small newspapers and even managed one in the Eastern Caribbean. And as a freelance writer, once interviewed the mighty Sparrow. She has also edited books for a variety of published authors. A compulsive reader and writer descended from at least two generations of compulsive readers and writers. She has a PhD in English from the University of California and an MS from Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism. Her formative educational experiences as a writer were her mother and grandmother, and her years of studying literature and writing with the poet Alan Stevens and the literary critic Marvin Mudrick at UC Santa Barbara's College of Creative Studies. She taught fiction writing and literature at Grinnell College and at UCSB's College of Creative Studies before quitting academic life to embark on what turned out to be a whole other level of writer's education. She is married to a writer named Roy Edroso, and they live in Washington, D.C. He too is a writer. But I'm going to pause there because it's really all about Kia tonight. And as you can tell from that amazing bio, she has extensive experience, not just writing, but also teaching writing and in different genre. So her scope is wide. So Kia, I'm going to allow you to start.
Well, I'm going to begin with the topic of the title of this talk, But first, I'm going to say I really invite you to bust in and ask me questions at any point. I can't see any of you, which might be all to the good. I don't know. But feel free to ask questions at any point, especially if I seem like I'm wandering off and lost the plot, because I usually have kind of a lot on my mind. So I titled this talk, I'm just jumping in because I can't see you. I titled this talk, Why Not How? Because of, I think, the last thing that Lisa mentioned or quoted from that bio note that I wrote was a whole other level of a writer's education. And I think I had more years of formal study of writing, supervised study of writing than most people get. And I still didn't get it. So I'm not holding that up as a particular virtue or achievement. I spent a lot of time studying writing, taking writing classes, and going to journalism school to learn how to write like a journalist. But I really couldn't learn why from how. That is, everything I was learning at journalism school about how to write, which frankly was not much, even by the scale of writing school. It really wasn't giving me a reason why I should write. And now, kind of what I consider late in my very strange career as a writer, I feel like the question of why you write is a much more important question than the question of how to do it. And I'm going to say something even more radical than that, because I'm going to say that I think that people who tell you that knowing how to do it is the way to do it are fooling themselves, possibly, and almost certainly fooling you. There is not really a how. There is no how antecedent to you having written something. You write something because you want to write it, and then you kind of figure out how to write it better. So that is my contentious, controversial statement. I'm going to talk a little bit about why I feel like I'm entitled to this opinion.
Okay.
Did I hear someone raise a question?
There is a question there, but I think you're about to answer it.
Okay. My mother told me that when I was about a year old, she used to read to me every night from this collection of Mother Goose's nursery rhymes. And every night have to read this baby the same set of nursery rhymes. By the time she'd done it about 10 times, she'd memorized them all, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it was it was just kind of boring to read the same thing over and over, but I insisted every night I had to have that book of nursery rhymes. And so one night, bored out of her mind, she started just sort of randomly flipping through the pages and reading nursery rhymes, just reciting the nursery rhymes, just to amuse herself. I protested loudly because I already knew exactly what order they were supposed to be in and what pictures went with which nursery rhymes, and she had to do it correctly. And I thought that was interesting because to me, when she told me that story, she only told me that story about maybe 10 years ago. It struck me because it really feels like I've been a literature nut all my life. I've been a literature nut and a compulsive reader, reading about 6 grades above my grade level my entire life. And when I went to the College of Creative Studies and had this mentor named Marvin Mudrick, he said, the only way you can really do this, the only way you can become serious about being a literary critic is to read everything. And a literary critic at that point seemed like the only thing that I was really capable of being, because I was struggling to write. I was having a really hard time with it. And I'm not very good at struggling, or at least I wasn't then. I had to learn how to learn. And that's what took me a long time. I had to learn that I could learn, because I didn't understand that either. There are a lot of reasons for that. but it took me a long time to learn how to write. But reading, no problem, baby. In fact, reading was how I avoided writing. So I read everything. And one of the things that came out of that, and I had these two mentors, you see, who were really unusual in that they were people who had also really read everything and kind of assimilated it so that it kind of flowed naturally. You know, it wasn't like, here's me with my personality and here's my scholarship and knowledge over here. They were all integrated so that their scholarship reflected their values and their values were informed by their scholarship. And they were brilliant. And they were, on top of being brilliant, really kind. So it seemed to me that whatever they were studying was working because it had self-evidently made them into good people. And so that was what I decided. Well, if I can't do anything else with myself, I don't know what else to do with myself, I can at least aspire to that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it seemed like if I didn't aim at, if I tried to do something that was, I wasn't sure I could succeed any other way, really. I just wasn't sure I could succeed any other way. So I set out to become, I thought, well, I'll just try to be as good as them. If they say I'm okay, I'm probably okay. And these were poets of national and writers of national, even international reputation. But it wasn't their reputation. It was really their character, the way they behaved to students, the way they wrote bravely and with integrity. And with humor and brilliance, the way they taught with integrity and without any sort of punitive system. Basically, they taught you to be in love with what you were studying and that was the best motivation to do it. So that's where my why comes from. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I have spent a lot of time on how, and it never worked as well for me as why. I mean, I'm studying with these guys and I'm still going to bookstores and buying, you know, all these books about how to write your novel or how to do plots. And I read them, I can't get anything out of them or any of the self-help literature, really. And then I remember one day I'm out with a couple friend of mine, my friend Jeff and another friend, and we're walking around and Jeff says something like, well, you know, the way you paint is you just paint what you like. And I know this seems like a big revelation, but it's really not. When you all your life, you've sort of told that it can't possibly be that simple. And it isn't quite that simple, but it's pretty simple. And I learned to write. This was the funny thing I would say about creative studies, is that ultimately at creative studies, I learned to write because of what I learned about reading in the literature classes. And I learned to be a critic because I learned from being in the writing classes. This is crazy, but it really worked that way. It really worked that way.
Well, I don't think it's crazy because one of the things I tell my students, especially my younger students, is that really the best way to improve your writing is to read, because then you see how persons are, you're exposed to a wider vocab.
Yeah.
And you see how people are structuring their writing, how you structure a sentence, how their story flows in a more meaningful way than being given a series of steps. And then you learn different techniques because each writer has a different technique as well.
Well, yeah, you know, and I'm this is a huge part of it. So the biggest thing, my friend Jervy, I don't know if he's out there, but he always used to say this, you know, you got to learn to hear, you got to love the sound of a good sentence. It has to give you, if you're not getting pleasure from reading writing, you're unlikely to give it.
Okay, so I have a question for you.
Yes.
I have a question for you. Actually, let me jump to Craig. Craig asks, why should we write? And so Craig, I think he has answered that, right? Write what you enjoy writing, write what you want to write about.
Well, I'm gonna lean into that answer a lot, if you don't mind, or
Oh,
I'm gonna
go
lean
right
into
ahead.
that, answering
Absolutely.
that question a lot. That's
Yeah.
really a good question, and I think that there isn't a simple. It's another one of those questions that you write because kind of because you need to. You're right because you need to.
What do you mean you need to?
Well, because you kind of, well, for me, I can speak from, there are a million reasons to write, and I'm really talking about the reasons why I write, and the reasons that I think that people should investigate when they think, they start thinking, yeah, I want to get into this writing thing. It is a kind of a falling in love thing. You fall in love with it because you sense the possibility of pleasure and of a large world of possible experience, of ways of experiencing that you can get to through this medium, right? You read, I can still remember I was 19 the first time I read the novel Anna Karenina. And it was a transformative moment in my life. I mean, once again, I said, here, this is a person who's a compulsive reader, right? Everywhere I go, I travel with more books than clothes. Anytime I take a trip, it takes me one day to pack the clothes and a week to pack the books. And when I read, so this has always been true. So, and I come along and I read this one novel and it retrospectively changes everything I've ever thought about novels. A whole bunch of things I thought I liked just fell away. They just fell away. And it really was a feeling of connection and a feeling like I need to do this. Another reason I needed to go into wherever this is. This is stuff, it goes right off the page into your head. When you're reading, you're imagining. You're not just playing with words, you're imagining.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing this very constructive, conceptual activity. You're building worlds in your mind through the guidance of the author's vision.
Right.
And you feel the desire of doing that because you feel like this is how you're going to understand the world.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you're going to make sense of your experience. This is where you can hold it fast long enough to get a glimpse of what it is. But there's a certain level, like there is I see a question from Craig. Is it more about satisfying an artistic desire to tell a story in your way? Well, I guess you could call it an artistic desire. I don't know if it's altogether an artistic desire. Sometimes for me, it's just the need to win all the arguments. And that's not a sufficient reason. Okay, but it is kind of an impulse that can drive you toward inquiry and reflection, which is a good thing. It's our duty to contribute other perspectives. Well, it depends on what you're writing. The thing that I got out of reading Tolstoy, to answer this question that I see up there from Craig about other perspectives, is that Tolstoy was at something we all do. We don't actually see into other people's minds. We have what they tell us, and then we have how we imagine what is going on inside of their consciousness, how we imagine the states of their consciousness. What are they feeling? We observe, it's partly observation. You think of Jamaica, how Jamaicans are very, very mindful, especially old-time Jamaicans. Least little bit of body language was like a loud signal. I remember I had a helper who used to be really annoying sometimes. And she said, don't stretch out your neck string at me. Right? So we have this capacity to read other people in 1,000 subtle ways. You watch the way somebody unfolds a newspaper when they're about to have their morning coffee, and you can tell whether that person thinks they're going to have a bad day or a good day. How do we know this? Right? We know it from observing because we're social animals. And so when we assume that if we're writing about life, we're writing about more than just our own lives. We're writing about how we conceive of what is going on in the consciousness of other people. And we try to do that in an attempt to fully represent and roundly represent their life, because that's doing them justice, right? Whether they're a villain or, a good person, right? You're trying to represent the state of feeling or the state of mind or the state of intention of another person. That comes into it, and you try to do that person the most generous justice that you can, right? And that's what I saw in Tolstoy. So the opening of the novel is a character who you really ought to think is a bad man. He's a philandering husband who has made his wife, his overworked wife, who has had too many children and lost her looks and is no fun anymore. And she caught him cheating with his children's governess. And he wakes up in the morning and he feels terrific about life until he remembers that his wife wants to leave him. And they're broke because he's a spendthrift and he's irresponsible. But when he puts his feet into his slippers, you feel how good those slippers feel, and you love that man because of his capacity for joy, for his capacity for pleasure, for his capacity to enjoy his own being, right? I don't know if Tolstoy had that capacity himself, because he was kind of a cranky guy sometimes, but he was able to imagine it in someone else, in a person that he didn't think he liked. So how do we do this? It's kind of magical. How do we do it? Well, we get to the big engine, as I call it, right? You really have to get down into your guts where you find these things come up, where things come up faster than the smart aleck who runs your social life can correct them and fix them and make them presentable to other people. And this takes a certain amount of courage, and it takes a certain amount of ability to, courage is probably the biggest thing. And a lot of my struggle was with the courage to write what I wanted to write or what I needed to write. I wanted to write clever things, but I was not very good at being clever. Is this making sense?
It is.
Okay.
What I'm taking from it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just adding what you said. I want to share it because I think it sums up what I'm taking away from what you said. You should write what you enjoy writing. It really should. It needs to come from a space of authenticity. And what you want to write and what you feel strongly about will differ from person to person, because that's what will inform what you're writing and how you write and what you share. And it really takes a lot of courage to be authentic, to not pander to what you think the market wants to read, what you think will sell, what you think a publishing house will accept, but really stay true to the story that it is that you're trying to bring.
Well, I'm gonna take that a step further, Lisa. And what I'm gonna say is it's very difficult to do the thing for the market if you don't have the energy of conviction going with you. This is what whether you do it for the market or other, and I think it's very hard to. Oh, sorry. Okay, how is it now?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's very hard to do anything if you really don't have the conviction that you want to do it,
So even if you are a commercial writer, be passionate about being a commercial writer. Like, be very clear about what your motive is.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And then, I have friends who are mystery writers.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple of friends who are mystery writers. The husband of one of them, who I knew when I was an undergraduate, I've lost touch, not really in touch with him now. He's like a big mystery writer. They also wrote for TV. So they wrote scripts for TV detective shows. cheesy 1980s detective shows on TV, on a US TV. And these are people who are really at the top. You know, the husband is at the top of the field. He is one of the best mystery writers writing in the US right now. And he decided, okay, I'm writing mystery rights. I'm writing mystery rights. These are people who, like me, have graduate degrees in English and pursued it with the same kind of like mad hunger. The wife, who I know somewhat better, she writes mysteries now. She wrote her dissertation, her doctoral dissertation, on the 18th century epistolary novel, right? Those massive, you know, doorstop sized 18th century novels that are just letters being exchanged among people. And it's just all this kind of internal dialogue being poured out on the page.
Okay.
That's what she wrote about. And then she goes off into the industry because her father was in the industry. And she and her husband go off to write in the industry, and they write detective shows, and they make enough money writing detective shows that they can quit and do what they like. And he writes mysteries, right? So he's writing for a very defined commercial market, and he does it really, 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 really well because he knows that market.
Right.
So I think whatever it is you're going to do, you want to give yourself time. And you know what? If you don't enjoy this stuff, you're not going to do it.
Right.
You're not going to do it. You're not going to do the reading if you don't enjoy it. If you really crave it, you're going to be picking up every book. Well, what is this one doing? How are they doing it? How's he solving it? How do they do villains? You got all these questions, and every book has possible answers in it, and you're just rushing through them. You know, it's kind of like shopping for a motorcycle. You know, you're looking for what clicks with you. You know, you're looking for the one. You want that right ride.
Right.
And you gotta go through everything. And every time you pick one up, you pick it up in kind of a hopeful way.
Right.
Lisa, you remember you and I were talking about dance.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the ways that I did I learned how to understand what was happening when I wrote. Was from taking dance classes. And I just started taking ballet classes because honestly, I was so wound up with anxiety because I was just nervous because I was frustrated about not writing and feeling unproductive and existential anxiety and stuff. I started taking these ballet classes mainly because I couldn't stand the music in the gym. So it was like, well, if I take the ballet classes, I like the music in there better. I took one class and I had pains in muscles where I didn't know I had muscles. Like that was literally a true thing, not just a joke. It was true. And if you've ever done anything like that, you've had that experience. And then I was hooked. And then I was hooked. And I was 23. I certainly wasn't going to have a professional career as a ballet dancer, and I had no such aspirations. All I wanted was to get good enough to enjoy what I was doing because doing it made me feel sane.
Right.
And if somebody had told me before that every night in ballet class, I was probably going to be doing 10, 20 pirouettes, and most of them were bad. And so in the end, you know, after 13 years, what is that now? About 38,000 pirouettes. And most of them were bad. I would have said, well, that's madness. Nobody does that. But you do it when you love something. And every time you pop up on your foot around, get your head around right, and you feel everything in your body aligned just right, you feel like you have defied gravity.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a messed up one, you fall out of the messed up one and you spring right back up and do it again.
Right.
That's how you learn to walk. That's how you learn to talk. That's how you learn to draw the picture of the 18th century lady with the big hair or the skeleton on the motorcycle. That's how you learned to do all sorts of stunts swimming. You just kept going because you were going to get it the next time. You were going to get it the next time. You were hungry for it. And you watched the people who were good at it. And you studied. Oh, I see. Did you play tennis? Any sport where you really wanted to get good at it, it's got everything you need to know to write. Everything you need to know. It's the same. So it finally comes down to if this fills you, if you think, oh no, this is awful. I'm not going to say what a lot of people would say, which is, oh, that proves you shouldn't write.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to say that you can kind of kindly and gently ask yourself what it is about that you don't like.
Okay. Okay.
What
And
is
I
it
think
about that puts you off?
And I think it's worth even just repeating your first comment, right? That idea of consistency,
Yeah.
continuously working on your craft and in however that looks, right? Because that could mean reading more
Yes.
or knowing what the gap is, what technique you're not comfortable with, and then finding whether it's a class or a book to supplement, to teach you how to do that.
To fill the gap. Well, I feel like a lot of my literary education was me kind of looking, well, you know, what happens is sometimes you get good at something, you're studying something. It could be tennis, it could be golf, could be ballet,
Yeah.
could be drawing. And you have many fronts that you need to move forward on when you're learning anything.
Right.
Right? You're never just learning one thing. Anything that is one thing is not enough. So one day you find that you've suddenly advanced on one front. You finally figured out how to get the ball over the net when you serve. And because you have a little time freed up and energy freed up from the frustration with that, you notice that you could put a bit more commitment into your backhand. And you begin to figure out the backhand, and you watch a Wimbledon match, and you suddenly, because you've kind of turned your inquiring mind that way, you suddenly notice, oh, this one player absolutely hammers that backhand. And you start rehearsing it in your mind. And when you go out on the field, you tell yourself, on the court, you tell yourself you're going to do it. And you do it. Right? Maybe you're not making the ball go over the net at 200 miles an hour or whatever, but suddenly you have more intention in what you're doing than you've ever been able to muster before.
Okay.
Again, so this is how you, so that your consistency is a consistency of it. There's about three things going on. There's the habit of just showing up,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's learning from examples, which
Right.
is a lot of things. Also
Right.
figuring out what you don't, includes also figuring out what you really don't want to do.
Right.
That's the writer you don't want to follow, the writer you don't like. What is drawing me forward? And then the third thing is, at some level, at some time, you will actually manage to feel like you're applying what you've learned in an intentional and meaningful way. And that's really not the same as copying.
Right.
It's something else. It's almost like your imagination, their imagination taught your imagination.
Right.
That's the level it's happening at, which is why I say it's more about why than how. Because if you have that sense of your own mind growing out toward this larger sense of the possibilities of what you might do, what you could do,
Mm-hmm.
that drives you forward. It pulls you forward. It takes care of the question of how.
So let me throw out to you, because what I'm saying, what I'm hearing from you, that is that if it's something that you're passionate about, the more that you write and the more that you expose yourself to different forms of writing and you see the gaps, is the more that it will draw you to finding ways to improve your own writing.
You will
What?
create those ways will come to you as a matter of course.
Right. So what do you think of that kind of very old school kind of advice of, you have to learn the basics, and it's only when you know the basics that you know how to break the rules?
What are the basics?
So that's the interesting thing. There are like so many
what are the basics?
there's so many different techniques of writing. Like if you just did a quick Google search about, if we think about fictional writing, story formats, and you'll come across the
I'm
hero's
saying
journey, and
do
you.
not start there.
Okay, so that was my question. Do
Do
you
not
want
start
new
there.
writers to start there? Okay, and the
You
answer is
have,
no.
all of us have a story that if we think about it for a minute, no, we don't just have one. We have a story that we're burning to tell. So what was about a week ago, my best friend from high school in Jamaica, I went to Priory. Some of you will know Priory.
Yeah.
Back in the days, this was in the 70s. And my best friend and I, we were practically joined at the hip. And, and then I moved away and I settled in California and she moved away and settled in Florida. And we sort of lost touch for many years. And then Facebook, of course, puts you back in touch with everybody. So she's back in, we've been back in touch for years. And she posted a picture of herself on Facebook last week. And she was diving off the cliff in Negril. But this was before Rick's Cafe was there. So it's just the bare iron shore, none of the railings and all the stuff so that all the drunk people could have their little fun. She was diving off the side of the road. And she was a diver. She studied diving at the stadium with Mrs. Sullivan, the old diving teacher. Maybe some of you heard of her. But Jamaica used to have a diving team, and Carolyn was on the diving team.
Okay.
And she did a swan dive off the side of the road. And Carolyn had good form for a swan dive. I could not learn diving. I took diving as long as Carolyn did, and everything I did just looked goofy. I mean, it was pathetic. But she was magnificent as a diver, fearless, I mean, I know I could have jumped off that rock, same as she did, because we were accustomed to going off the 10-meter platform at the stadium. But I would never in a million years have made it look like I was flying like she did. And I started thinking about, I remember, that story, seeing that image brought back so many memories, because one of the main reasons I know anything about Negril at all is that Carolyn and her parents used to take me down there when I was in the last 2 years before I left Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
One of her relatives had built a little guest house or something, one of the first hotels that was built there. At that time, 7 Mile Beach had nothing on it.
Okay.
You could just sit there on the beach unmolested all day. 2 15-year-old girls sit there on the beach and nobody trouble you. About once an hour, an extremely stoned American hippie would walk by. And that was it. You and the sea, and it was clean and it was empty, and you could spend the whole day there baking yourself and working on your perfect tan in your little shoplifted bikini.
Oh, jeez.
And that was, we were naughty girls in some ways. Anyway, 2 days later, I felt like I got to write the story about one night when we were about the night before one of these trips to Negril. And in 2 days, not even, it's about 10 hours of writing. I wrote about, I think now I have probably about 2,000 words in about 10 hours. And it's half of what I wanted to include in that story, right? And I have some idea about what needs to be told first, what needs to be there first. But when I begin to put pen to paper, I'm not sure. Should I describe the house first that they lived in? Should I talk about how we were getting ready for the trip? Should I talk they were trying to a party in Morant Bay, or how they got dressed for the party? And then I got caught up in a story about the party. Up to now, 2,000 words later, I haven't reached Negril yet. I don't care. I know I'm going to get to Negril. But I have to get to Negril the way I got to Negril then, in my imagination.
Right.
Everybody is the expert on their subject, on their stories. You know best. You're guided by your feeling about what is important in the story.
Right.
Something happens at a birthday party, right? Well, what did that mean to you? What did that mean to you? I'm going to say this. I'm very aware that your Um, you know, I think about this in the context of Jamaica, particularly, where we are drilled, we are little colonials, and we are to this day, and we are drilled in how we must do things if we want to get on. And we get on by doing things the way that we are told to do things. And we get very good at it. We're good at it, you know. That's why you land here where you can make so much more money doing the regular things and zoom. But I mean, when I say here, I mean in the US. We're really good at this. We're really good at following orders and mastering techniques.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about it is a lot of that stuff doesn't explain us to us.
Okay.
Our history, our Jamaican history, the history of our actual lived lives is not written down. We come from a culture that was majority illiterate within my lifetime. Most Jamaicans have no written memory. My father told me that when he was growing up, he and his family lived on Bournemouth Beach. You know where Bournemouth Beach is?
Yeah.
It's like the end of Mountain View Road, you know, down there when you go past the stadium, you're heading toward the harbor.
Mm-hmm.
You're right down there, that stretch of waterfront going, you know, if you turn toward downtown along Mountain View Road, that was a high-end residential area once upon a time. And there was a beach club there called Bournemouth Beach Club. And my father comes from a family of water rats and sea creatures, and they like to be near the sea. So he grew up on the sea, and he and his brothers played in the sea every day. He told me that when he was a child, you could see schools of seahorses swimming past Bournemouth Beach.
Oh, wow.
Swimming at Bournemouth Beach. Where is that written down? What is it that is going to be remembered about life in Jamaica? Who's going to write it? Whose task is that? You go, well, I don't know if I can make any money at it. You go dead same way, you know. Broke or rich, it goes. And this is why the discovery of your subject is important. The discovery of what matters in your life, enough for you to want it remembered and recorded and envisioned and imagined by someone else, is important. You can do it. You have all the qualifications to do it. You are ready. There is no how that you do not have. If you can tell a funny story, you can write it. You will find the words. But what Lisa said about consistency, you show up until it begins to feel like natural to do this slightly strange thing. Practice. You have to write a lot of stuff you know you're going to throw away. But you go, well, but you know, have the vision of getting it out. Am I making sense?
You are, and I'm making a note of it because I think it's important. So I want to make sure I write this correctly. The discovery of what is important in your life has to be important enough for you to write that story for others to read.
Yeah. I mean, you know,
I mean, it has to come from, again, this goes back to your why. Are you writing this story
right.
just because, or are you writing it because you think this is a record has to be kept of your experience because you think it will contribute in some way?
I don't know if it will contribute in some way, but it is an impulse that you feel. You feel the potential of the story. You know why? It's like, you know, Shakespeare wrote, what is it, 140 something sonnets.
Mm-hmm.
And most people read the plays, they don't read the sonnets. I read the sonnets, I'm not all that hot on the plays. And one of the continuous things that he recurs to in the sonnets, because it was a kind of a thing that Renaissance writers did, was talk about posterity. I'm writing for posterity. I'm writing for the people that are going to be living after me. Well, when he wrote that, he didn't think that the people that were going to be reading his stuff was people like you and me, some somebody out in, there wasn't really a Jamaica yet.
Right.
There wasn't a California yet. But he didn't know who it was. He threw it out there, you know?
Right.
Because you throw it out there because the world is vast and who knows what shore this thing you did will fetch up on and make a connection. But really the feeling of it is, you know, I honestly don't know. It's like it's internal as much as anything. It isn't so much like there is a public sense. Like I go, look, at the very least, you knock the things out, you knock out some memories. These women on the Vintage Jamaica Facebook page,
Mm-hmm.
some of them are turning out these long stories. There was a woman she was from some place way up in the bush, someplace I never heard of. She was telling the best ghost stories that she actually experienced. You know, everybody, no, you saw that man. No, that's Mr. So-and-so. He's been dead for years.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Like this. And these stories about what it's like, there's all these stories. I mean, the life that these people remember is changing quickly. A lot of these things are not going to be there anymore. So you can go into this in a kind of a totally impersonal way. You know, there's a photographer I follow on Twitter. He's an English photographer. And he posts a lot of photographs by sort of past photographers who were really students of English life, who were observers of life in England at different eras. And he'll post a picture and he'll say, take photographs of even the most ordinary thing because things change so much. It might be the only way to record it. There are so many ordinary things are what disappear. All right. There's going to be a bloody statue of whichever prime minister, you know, bonehead. You know, there will be statues of them. They're covered. You don't have to deal with them. Okay. But why there was always a fight at cousin so-and-so's family party and how everybody forgave Christmas party and how everybody forgave everybody afterwards. People will read it and they will smell the sorrow.
Okay. I have a question for you from Craig.
Yeah.
Well, two questions. So the first one he asks, what do you define as success? Is it following the template of a great book or is it being a bestseller?
Well, I mean, really. I mean, I like the thing about a bestseller is like the money just comes raining down on you, you know, and you don't really follow the template of a great book. You follow an urge that's in you. There's a story that wants to be told. You know, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, when I was growing up, she used to tell me these stories of her childhood. Her father died tragically when she was about 18 years old, and her sister died. I think it was her sister died, and then her father died within months of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And she basically told me the whole history of her relationship to her father, which was like the defining relationship of her life. He was the great love of her life. Right. And it set the tone of everything that happened in her life, her love for her father. She used to tell me the same stories every few weeks. You know, we slept in the same room, and she'd wake me up, and she wouldn't wake me up. You know, we'd goofing around, and she would start on one of these stories again because it was playing in her head. You know, remember the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner? The guy just grabs hold of the wedding guest and says there was a ship.
No, I don't know it.
When the story is told. Okay, well, it's this story about, the sailors who go down to the South Pole, and one of them kills the albatross, the friendly bird, and then he goes through all these horrible supernatural experiences, and he's left with a compulsion to tell the story. People who have been through trauma have that happen to them, and my grandmother's experience was traumatic, and so she had to keep, she didn't want it forgotten, what she had lost.
Okay.
She didn't want it forgotten, what she had lost. And so the story kept telling itself, and it's like, no, this hadn't happened to me. But it's funny how a story just, you inherit it,
Right.
And it comes and lives in you like it lived in her. And then it's your story to tell. That's why she told you, so it wouldn't be forgotten.
And so maybe that is the definition So I guess the definition of what is successful is very personal. So in the same way that we are redefining success as, is it excessive wealth or is it life balance? Like there's so many ways to define what success is. And so I think for you, what you're saying is that it's very personal, and it may not be that it's a bestseller from a financial perspective, but is it a story that's
It's
retold and
I
out?
write, yeah, I write the stories that I feel. I don't always write stories. I write a lot of different things. I mean, I'm sort of easing back into writing stories that is narrative again. But whenever I'm writing narrative, it's always kind of in the context of some idea or other.
Right.
And I just try not to overplay that because it annoys some of my friends. But everybody has their own ambition
Right.
for what they want to do. If you want to write bestsellers, you can go about it very methodically, like that mystery writer Tom Perry does, and he knew exactly how to do it. This is a guy, he went and studied how to do it. And then he went and he did it really well. You don't have to do it very well to be a bestseller. You know how many of them are just such crap, like detective books? You can go through the airport bookshop and they're awful. You're like, they're unreadable.
This is a good segue into Craig's second question. So what are the elements of a good book?
It's this you know what? It depends on what the book is for, obviously, right? So what good according to what criteria? I read every day. I get paid to read what I consider some of really awful writing. And then periodically I have to do, like I've been doing this week, I have to rewrite it to make it into a slightly more accessible format. Now, when I do that, I discover a lot about the nature of this writing, and I understand why it has to be the way it is, because there's politics woven into it, and unavoidable politics, and entrenched institutional politics, and nobody can ignore it. If you ignore it, the thing does not reach its destination.
Right.
So that's one model of success. All right. Nobody will read this. But it's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I could tell you the elements of making a good book. I don't know what the elements of making a good book are. Nobody does. Nobody does. Don't have spelling errors. Have continuity. Don't start out. Don't have things that leave the reader puzzled. Like, does this writer know what they're doing? Why am I confused? Don't make it seem like you don't know how to keep the reader going where you need them to go. So probably the biggest element is be a person that the reader can trust, right? So make sure that your logic is sound,
Mm-hmm.
and that you don't inadvertently create unintentional confusion.
Okay.
Beyond that, I'm going to give you another example. So a couple of years ago, I don't even remember who put me onto him, but I discovered this Norwegian writer named Karl Ove Knausgaard.
Mm-hmm.
And he is probably the best-selling novelist in Europe right now.
Okay.
He's been translated into probably every language. His first book is 6 volumes, and each volume starts at about 100, and this volume is about 1,500 pages.
Wow.
Now, let me tell you something. Nobody would say that is a good idea for a book. I started reading and I could not stop until I couldn't read anything else until I got all the way to the end of volume 6. Couldn't stop. All right. And let me tell you, there is not one person in the literary marketplace who will tell you to try to do a thing like that. They will tell you, no, are you out of your mind? Best selling. This man will never miss a meal. Okay. He is set up. He doesn't have to write another book for as long as he lives. He does. He writes more books. And there is an appetite for them because of this book that should never have been written. So I could tell you guidelines, but that doesn't tell you anything about what you might do.
Right.
You must find out what you can, well, you must find out what is possible. There is the question, right? So what finally, like, there is the answer to that question ultimately comes from you having that hunger for the written word. I can tell you, you know what? Whatever the answer to that question might be, if you try something, it's better than not trying it. You could try to write the worst book on earth. And you know, it could really work out to be fabulous.
All right.
Is that making sense?
It is. It is. And I think the key takeaway from this conversation really has to be authenticity. You know, knowing yourself and writing from your heart. What is it that you want to write? What is weighing on your heart? And I mean, that could be an amazing story, fictional story, or it could be a blog on seahorses in Kingston Harbor 50 years ago. Like, we're not even saying be sentimental and nostalgic. It could be a book on the World Bank.
It could be the funny thing that happened at the concert a year ago, that every time you and your friends remember it, you all fall apart laughing again. It could be anything. It could be anything.
Right.
You know? And I know that it seems like there is a kind of way to present what I'm saying that make it seem like I would just say, all you have to do is this. This is what's good. Here it is. You know, when I first moved to Washington, I didn't have a job for several months, and I would do this periodically, actually, during my writing, during the many years when I didn't know what I was doing, how I was going to actually get myself motivated to write. And I would buy the Writer's Digest Guide to Literary Agents and small presses and magazines. And and I would flip through this thing, and they'd have the listings, you know, and here's the magazine, here's the Shawnee Gazette Intelligencer and Gopher Butt, whatever. And I would read this thing, and they would always be like, well, you know, we publish vampire stories about, we publish stories about organic vampires, but what we really want is high quality writing. They all wanted high quality writing. And I would look at well, this magazine is obviously garbage. They want high quality writing. Here's another magazine that might not be garbage. They want high quality writing. What the heck does that mean? What it means is you have to discover. It's just like I can't tell you how to do a pirouette. You have to find those muscles up there somewhere around your sphincter that keep you all together. You have to find those muscles. You have to find, you know, you flow toward it. You flow toward what you need, right? There are many different types of good. Every one of you that thinks about writing has the need to flow toward the writing that is your vision, right? And maybe you want to write a book about a travel guide to cultural tourism in Jamaica, which would be an ass-kicking book, a really good one. A really well-written one, just like my favorite. If I were a tourist and knew what I know about Jamaica, this is where I just hit these spots. You know, there was a fantastic program on RJR many years ago, where these I think it was radio journalists, might have been TV people, because I never saw it because I was in St. Kitts at the time, and it was the journalists who did this program who told me about it. They would just pick a funny place name in Jamaica and go there and do a little story about the place. Just a local person, right? And I thought, this is so brilliant, right? Well, maybe you want to do something like that. Maybe you want to write a white paper on cultural development of the urban space in Kingston, you know? And you kind of want to go, well, here's where we could go from there. Maybe you want to do a white paper on that. whatever the thing is that you want to do, you have to flow toward the how. You have to flow toward it. You have to open to it and discover what you need specifically for that
It
in
is like,
the fullest way.
right. So
Okay,
I'm gonna
there's
revisit.
no shortcut.
Yeah, I'm going to revisit this comment because I think this is important because we're starting with the why. Why do you want to write? Knowing what you want to write. And from there, once you're showing up consistently, you'll find examples of what you want to write so that you know how to structure it.
You,
What
you're
it
looking,
should look like.
you're looking for them. You're looking for them the same way you would look. The same way you're gonna, like I said, it's just like if you're buying a motorcycle, you go and look at all the motorcycles,
Yeah.
and then you narrow down your focus to what looks like where you want to go, what is speaking to you, what is pulling you into the process. Along the way, you have picked up a lot of experience whose immediate payoff you don't see, but which is working with the big engine, your subconscious, to produce for you. You're collecting a massive amount of information, but it doesn't feel like that's what you're doing. It doesn't feel like that's what you're doing, because when you're studying up about buying the motorcycle or the boat or whatever, you want to look at every single picture of a boat because you want the right one, the one that's for you. And you don't care how long it takes. You're
Right.
not rushing. You're looking at boats. Well, I like this feature on that. Oh, look at that. Look at that brass thingamabobber there. That's fabulous. I want one of those. I gotta have this on my boat,
Right.
And then so the project takes its form from your desire. Whatever the desire is. That's why I say the why generates the how.
Yeah.
You already know this because you have all already done it.
Yes. Yes. In other ways, yes.
Somewhere in your life, you have done it.
Like that. The why generates the how.
You find a way to do the thing you need to do. And that includes consulting experts. It includes finding the teacher who can teach you. Right?
Uh-huh.
And when I went to that teacher, but he couldn't really help me with my backhand, but this I watched this, how he did that. You find the teacher that teaches you to where you need to be. And it's weird because when you begin on the quest, the teacher shows up.
Yeah, absolutely.
The teacher shows up. It's putting cheese and crackers on the altars of the gods of what we want. You show up, the rest. Somehow, it's like almost like you've opened your mind to it and you begin to observe everything around you that helps.
Right.
It's not really any kind of magic. It's really a shift in your capacity. Because a lot of these questions that you have look very different from outside of being working, from how they look when you're outside of working, from when you're inside of working. When you begin to tell your story, it's a very different animal from thinking that maybe next week you'll start.
And I think that's key too. You have to start.
Just
so
start.
that all of these pieces fall into place.
You can throw it in the trash if you don't like it,
Right.
And you can do it over 11 gazillion times. My most published friend writes things over, I don't know how many times. He writes them over the same reason I do. I keep discovering sometimes, I've got 4 or 5 versions of something I've written, having forgotten the previous versions. Because I like the idea that I'm writing about.
Right.
And you need something to ship something out. I really actually do that. I'm getting ready to do it again. So nice. That's one of the benefits of practice. You accumulate material. It actually happens. You discover. There's so much more you have if you just access it that way.
Right. So this is a first, right? Because I think we have gone almost an hour and a half.
Oh God, I'm so sorry.
It has been so interesting. And I think what was good about this conversation was, I think you've really illuminated what you meant by the why, not the how. Mm-hmm. But it was also a really interesting journey into some very classic works of literature, and even just I love that you threw in so many authors and so many references for
Yes.
anyone who is interested in looking for some additional reading as well.
Mhm.
Um, and I think we got some good questions. I think we
I
got some
think
questions
so.
that really illuminated what you were
Yeah.
trying to say even more. Um, I don't know. You dropped so many gems. Like if I asked you, what is the one thing that you'd want the audience to take away from this evening? What would it be?
I would like them to write without knowing whether or not it will sell. Just write for the sheer joy of experiencing the experience that you're writing about.
Right? For the sheer joy of experiencing the experience.
That you're writing about.
I love that. Love that. I'm writing it. I have to share it.
Just try it. Just do it.
Yeah.
Honestly, one other thing I thought about, this is my punchline, my last word on the subject. It occurs to me that Norwegian writers and I it's sort of like somehow I don't know how, but I know a lot of artists who are like not professional artists, and I would say that most successful artists, and I look at this stuff a lot. I'd say the most successful people in this to me are the ones who are asking why, not how, or they're asking why before how.
Right.
Their work answers a why. They're not really focused on technique so much, except they want to do something special with material. They're really they're really asking a kind of a why question with what they're doing. They're asking a question they don't have an answer to.
Right.
And honestly, those people make more money.
All right. Ask them.
Ultimately, they make more money because when they put something across, it makes a bigger noise.
You're right.
Not many of them get to, but again, it's where you see where you're aiming. But the why question is a bigger question, and we can all answer it or try.
Nice.
Yeah.
So,
So
Kia,
thank you.
thank you so much for being on. I hope anyone who is viewing this video either in real time or after the fact is as excited about the content and is walking away with as much as I walked away with. Because I don't even think that this is advice that pertains to writing only. I think this pertains to anything that you endeavor to pursue in your life. So these are wise words, these are priceless. Check us out, Lisa McLean Publications. Kia is on Instagram as @KioPenso.
Except I never do anything there.
And what is your Twitter handle?
Poco Jump.
So I will share that here.
I know. There's a reason for that, okay? And I'm going to give you the reason. The reason is quite simple. Some of my relatives love those Pocomania Love in Dear songs. And
Yeah.
I had this named it after that because they enjoyed it so much. They
Do they
enjoyed
for me?
these are the old relatives,
No, I know, because I mean, nobody really talks about that much anymore unless you're really studying Jamaican culture. I'm trying to find, what's the spelling again for your Twitter handle?
EOCO Jump, all in one word.
So guys, if you want to follow up with Kia, let me share this. This is her Twitter handle. As she said, she is on Instagram, but you're probably going to find her on Twitter first. So @PocoJump. Instagram is @KiaPenso. This has been great. I've enjoyed this.
Well, thank you. Don't send any trolls at me.
Absolutely not. All right. As usual, chase those dreams this week, one step at a time. And I will see you again next Thursday at 8:30 right here.
All
Thanks.
right. Thank you all. It's been a blast.
Thanks, Kia.
I'm exiting the studio now.